I am the project manager for a really important update to our comprehensive plan. For those who are just joining us, our comprehensive plan is the set of series of policies and the vision for the city for how it's going to carry itself forward. And for the city, our comprehensive plan update is going to bring us to where we want to be in 2050. Now, to really think about how all these things come together, how your neighborhoods will look and feel, we have engaged in a week-long process, what we call a charrette, to get the background and concern and the hopes of neighbors like yourself, local businesses, and background from city staff. And with that, we actually have wonderful partners here, our colleagues at Dover Cole, and I'll let Natalie introduce the team and go into what we did during the week with the charrette and what we have found so far.
Hello everyone, thank you for being here tonight with us. I'm Natalie Lipsy with Dover Cole & Partners, one of the consultants on this group, and a little bit of the people who are on our team as well. We have Joe Cole, we have Robin Crowder, we have Sage, I forgot your last name, I'm sorry, Zhang, and we have Kenneth Garcia. Thank you. And you could always speak to one of us if you have any specific questions along the way. But similarly to what Ed said, our goal tonight was to hear from you and what you wanted the future of North Miami Beach to be. We went through a week-long process. We had kickoff meetings, we had open houses, we met with the children within the different neighborhoods, and now we're here at the work in progress presentation to show you what we've heard throughout the week, as well as some graphics that we've created to depict the different topics we heard and make sure that it matches the vision that the community wants it to be. Now is the time to tell us anything we're missing, but a bit of what we've heard today. We've met with, we had the first hands-on session in Ulita Park, where we gathered around the maps and drew our different ideas. We then heard from the community present those ideas back to us, and a bit of the different issues that they're seeing around the city, as well as the issues that they're seeing specifically within Ulita Park. We also met with the children within Ulita Park at the daycare centers that they have throughout the week, and an open house in Highland Village. We met with the community members there and their concerns and goals for the community, and a junior session with the children within that facility as well, and their hopes and dreams for the community as well as their concerns. We also had a junior workshop session within City Center. And there were a lot of similarities between the different communities as well as between the different neighborhoods, as well as specific topics that were brought up by the specific neighborhoods. And the comprehensive plan will look at both citywide and neighborhood centered. But a bit of what we heard were the desire for more mixed use locations, different destinations throughout the city as well as within the neighborhood centers, having a reduction in traffic and more public transit, as well as concerns about flooding and safety within neighborhoods, having more street lights, more sidewalks, different topics such as these. We also heard similar concerns from the children and their hopes and dreams. These are some big ideas that we heard from the different children at the work sessions, the junior work sessions, and they had ideas such as splash pads, ice cream shops, but they also wanted street lights and speed bumps, more sidewalks, public transportation, similar things that the adults within the sessions wanted. The community is really for everyone, both the future citizens and the future adults within the city and the adults who are currently here today. Everybody within the community lives here and wants to thrive and continue to live in North Miami Beach. We also met with different city members, such as the transportation planners, Parks and Rec, Public Water Department, additional citizens who came into the open house sessions, and we received different input from them. So now I wanted to turn back to you and ask, who are you within the room? Who do we have with us tonight? So this is a public polling. If we usually do this digitally, since we're a small group, you could just stand up and say whether you've been to any of our events, or just raise your hand if you've been to our events throughout the week. Perfect. And has anybody not been to any of the events this week? Is this your first time with us? No? Okay. Well, we're happy to have you back. We also have a secondary question, which is what neighborhood you're from. So, what neighborhood are you all from, if you wouldn't mind mentioning?
Park.
Yes.
Highland Village.
Yes.
Close to the library.
Yes. All right. Thank you for being here and for having a. Oh yes. I'm sorry. Could you repeat it again?
Freeman Heights.
Freeman Heights. All right. Perfect. So we have a variety of residents, so we'll get a wide perspective of the entire city as well as concerns for each specific neighborhood. We'll skip to the next question. Throughout the different events, we also had the one-word cards, where we wanted to hear what what your idea of North Miami Beach is today, what you have in, what you see around you, as well as what your future vision is for the city. And we heard a bit about the concerns of being a through city, a lot of traffic within the neighborhood, but also community pride for being part of North Miami Beach and the different neighborhoods throughout. But the future vision for what we heard was continuing to be a family-friendly place that's beautiful, that's clean, that's safe, with a lot of potential. We also had these visual preference surveys, and we collected a lot of information from all these different events. We were surprised by a lot of the responses. We had these two different options for townhouses, and they were both equally split, almost 50-50. What we expected was 60% of not liking the garage in the front and really having these doors. But seeing that it's a 50-50 split, it shows how much housing is really needed within the community and how much we actually need more options for housing. Similarly, we received a lot of desire for more single-family homes within the community, and a desire for alternative housing, having ADUs and having cottage courts as alternative, smaller scale housing as well. We also had a civic open space survey, where, again, a lot of open park areas are desired, whether they be public or passive or active. Just having open spaces is a big desire within the city. Additionally, more activation of the creek. And this one was a split of 50-50 for a shared street, which was a surprise because we had a lot of people concerned about fast traffic. But there is a big desire for having public spaces where people could really gather and destinations to get to. We had visual preference surveys for mobility and a lot of desire for ways to get from one neighborhood to the next and to get to different the different creek areas as well as city center and from one space to the next, whether it be through a like a private street that's just for multimodal paths or on-street parking, which on-street paths. And we were quite surprised that with the fast traffic, we would still have a desire for bike lanes on-street. But if there is a different opinion within the room, please let us know. There was also a lot of hesitation towards different scooters and surprisingly a desire for electric bikes, since we had heard that they had bikes in the past and they no longer have them, so a desire to have them back. And of course, different public transportation options and increasing the variety of public transportation options. We also had a survey for commercial uses and a big desire for local neighborhood commercial instead of large office complexes. and a lot of local community spaces, whether it be through cafes or local restaurant spaces. And having commercial spaces really be within the neighborhood at a neighborhood scale instead of big box uses, such as the Walmarts of the world in here. And this all adds into the 5 big ideas, which are to create a complete neighborhood that has all of your uses easily accessible, as well as having a destination to get to when you're leaving your house and walking around the community. An increase in housing options, whether it be ADUs, cottage courts, townhouses, just more housing at different scales, and safer trails, both within your city and within your neighborhoods, and interconnection between those trails. And an expanding economic opportunities where you could start your own businesses and have them be a small scale as you grow, go into larger solid structures. So you could have business incubation opportunities throughout the city. We were really looking at the neighborhood as these 5-minute walk cores, and where mapping out the different connections between these different neighborhood centers and what is missing within these neighborhood centers. Some ways to connect that aren't prevalent within the community now are having more signage so that you are able to actually walk around and know where you're going without, which could be at many different scales. And it could be a larger sign that's a welcome sign that brings you in, or a smaller scale to show you which way it is to the trail networks or which way to your community center, and more wayfinding modes, which are helpful for younger children as well to walk around. This all adds up to the different gateway centers and different wayfindings that could be throughout the different neighborhoods. And these could show up in many different ways. They could be fountains, they could be plaza spaces, they could be the greens that already exist, but having different locations and destinations within each neighborhood. They would all be interconnected through different trail networks, and each network is a variety of uses, whether it be biking paths, walking paths, or multimodal transport, different ways to interconnect through the different tapestry of neighborhoods. Currently, all of the gateway signage is vehicular in scale, and these are different ways to make it back into a pedestrian scale to show the different ways you could actually get around without having to be stuck in traffic all day. And these could be done through additional fountains or large structures, or just smaller density items like a small pocket park, or that will all bring you into the Snake Creek. All modes lead to the Snake Creek, and all modes lead to the different neighborhood centers. The existing condition of Snake Creek is a smaller path along the side, about 8 feet, and it could be a wider path with different locations to arrive to, have birthday parties, barbecues, different locations to activate these paths. Additionally, the option to open up the park. We heard a lot of concerns about the park having the gate, a gate around the memorial park. And all of this would lead to the desire to have a larger bridge in the way to get across, and through either a bike or through the scooters or through running, and having more activation throughout the space, and pavilion spaces. Along the entire city, there could be different pocket park areas, either activating pocket park spaces that already exist, such as this, where you could have play fields as well as exercise equipment for adults. So a little bit of destinations for everyone, whether it be the small children who need a field to run and play in a safe space that's not that's enclosed within the pocket park, and different pavilion spaces to have different gatherings that are under shade. You would also have exercise equipment for adults to be able to activate the space as well with the children. and splash pads, which we heard a lot of with the younger children, that they were looking for places to run around in the water. So next we're going to talk about flooding, and Ed will come and speak with us.
So, flooding, familiar issue for a lot of folks in the city because we have dealt with this for decades. We have come some way along the way, and made improvements throughout the city, but, it's an ever-evolving problem, especially with climate change and what we've seen with the rains in recent years. What you see here is actually the basis of our understanding from a ministerial standpoint. And that is, hey, what are the elevations within the city? And we heard a lot from our neighbors down in the Highland Village about how their neighborhood always floods. Well, the neighborhood floods because if you look at everything that is dark green, as you hit toward green, you're going to -8 feet below sea level, where the yellow is about 0 feet. So now you have areas of the city which are either way on the coast or where it's inland, it's in a basin. And so that's where, when we did a flood modeling activity a year and a half ago at the city, the folks at Kimberly Horn did the study for the city and did a vulnerability assessment. They looked at how if it rained, where the water would pool, and where these community issues are. So we know that flooding can be an issue. Here's where we need to think about things in a comprehensive plan, right? Because, and I'll get involved because I know folks are taking pictures of the slide, because there are different ways to consider different opportunities to address. And there's no one direct answer that solves everything when you have what's going on within the city this way. There are different ways to address include stormwater and wastewater engineering improvement. These include things like the backflow preventers that are currently budgeted and the city is working with implementing in the Highland Village area in 2026. They're going to bid right now on those. But past that, it's also taking a step further and thinking about our pumps, our capacity improvement, our outfall improvement, also slated for various communities, various neighborhoods within our community. Highland Village in 2027, along 163rd Avenue and so forth. There's a whole list, and we have left Public Works Department's number up front if there are further questions on that. Beyond that, when we think about comprehensive plan and long-term policies, about how we design our neighborhood. Freeboards, for example, where you raise your house, thinking about flood-prone areas, designing our houses differently. Next door in North Miami, they had the Good Neighbor Park, which was a house that was flooded time and time again. And so they purchased that house and they turned it into a retention pond and lot that is a park when it doesn't rain. But guess what? It holds enough water that will help prevent flooding for the 20 lots around it. We haven't explored ideas like this at the city, but we have to take a comprehensive approach, whether it's, like you see on the left, thinking about housing and how we design housing differently, having the non-livable space where you have your garage or storage space on the ground floor and thinking about the livable space being elevated, to thinking about maybe we do need to acquire property in order to create that retention pond so that we sacrifice one or two properties, but use that to help ensure the survival of the other properties within our community. And that's a difficult conversation that we have to have in the city. Or it's also about thinking about landscaping, about having plants like the red maples, which are native to South Florida, which have deep roots and which absorb water a bit more. Thinking about rain garden. And of course, that ties back though into public spaces or swale and how we deal with those a little bit differently. And we have to take a comprehensive approach. It's about community needs versus desire. It's about how we deal with our roadway, retention, our housing development in one comprehensive package. And, that goes with the Highland Village. I believe now it's my turn to turn over back to Natalie, right? And we'll go further on this.
Yes. So, similar to what Ed was saying, these are different options for retaining water on site. And they don't have to be just ponds that are always having retention ponds, but they could be uses for the community to have green spaces when it's not raining that would then work as retention ponds when it does. Additionally, there are on-street options, so just on the sides of the roads, having different paths, like different connecting canal spaces that could retain ponds, and these are different water retention options, such as rain gardens that have tubes underneath. There are many options that you would need a mix of all of these, because there's no, like I said, there's no one solution that'll solve it all at once, but a mix of everything would begin to alleviate the issues. Another key issue that we heard of was transportation. There are a lot of different transportation stops, but the wait times are very long at these different places, and it's very hot in the Florida sun to be standing at these bus stops. So having different options for either more stops along the way or different shaded areas. And these could include more options for public transportation. Within the city, there's the freebies, there's the trolley system, there's the bus system. There's also the option of having this small cart that's about the size of a golf cart that could zoom around traffic, or if we were to create this multimodal path, would be able to be within that, or a path specifically for a smaller vehicle. And the bus stops could be options for creating art within the community that represents the neighborhoods themselves, and we become a way to really indicate that you're within North Miami Beach, and the traffic that's currently flying through would be able to know that they're in North Miami Beach and what the culture is here. And these would be with local artists as an option. There's also the unique opportunity within Sunray West and Sunray East, because both of these neighborhoods have alleyway systems currently, and there are different ways to use alleyway systems to meet the different housing needs within the community. There's missing middle housing that uses cottage courts, ADUs, townhouses, and a lot of these different missing middle housing uses need alleyway systems. You could have them without alleyways, but if you were to have alleyways in the back, the parking could be along the alley and really activate the street in front. Additionally, these alleys are spaces to have ADUs, whether they be attached ADUs or detached ADUs. And an ADU is an accessory dwelling unit. It's a smaller scale house to have more density within the neighborhood without needing additional height. It's the neighborhood alternative to density. There's also the strategy of cottage courts that could be put into deeper lots and using the larger backyards as a gathering space for a central green for all of those houses. That would be the smaller ADUs around this central green, with the approval of the different houses within if they were interested in combining into a cottage court system. There are the unique opportunities within the city if it's so desired. Next, we're going to talk about Ulita, and we'll have Kenneth join us.
Hi, good evening, Kenneth Garcia. I was taking a look at the area around Ulita Park. There's some kind of a business frontage there that is not really cohesive and is really a tremendous opportunity to create a place that's kind of neighborhood serving, neighborhood center. So, neighborhood centers can be large or they can be small. This is one that actually the blocks here are really tiny. So it's logistically difficult to build anything much different than what's already been built there. But that also creates a really interesting, walkable sets of streets because they're so small. There's lots of different ways to get around, and it's directly connected to the park. So we were looking at first how you could improve the streets, those streets, planting trees, kind of formalizing the on-street parking, and improving the lighting, improving the sidewalks, all that kind of thing. And then as a next step, then you could bring in kind of private investment. You could still keep some of the existing buildings if desired, or but you could strategically infill those spaces. Another thing that we heard multiple times throughout the week was this kind of consternation about all the very tall buildings that are coming into the city. So we were trying to, what's going on? Sorry. We were trying to understand kind of where we're starting from. So we created this map that shows just in the existing regulations where the height is allowed. So yeah, there's a timer. There's a timer on the slide. The darkest colors here are 40 stories based on the existing zoning. And the city, over the past several years, they've kind of tried to be very strategic about where those towers are permitted. But in the last 2 or 3 years, what has happened is that at the state level, the state of Florida has preempted local municipalities through something that's called the Live Local Act. That's a way to encourage affordable housing. So if you provide 40% affordable housing in your project, then the local zoning is preempted by the state. And that means that anywhere in that dark area, those is now a much larger area where you can build to the highest height in the city. So there's a lot, you see where all that red is, that's where a developer could come in through the state and the city can't do anything about it. So that's something that we need to keep in mind.
The city can't do anything about it. You said the state can't do anything about it.
The city can't do anything about it, yes.
Can you explain how you measured that?
Yeah, so the specific regulation in the state says that this applies to property that is zoned commercial or industrial or mixed use, and they can use the highest height within 1 mile of that property. So if there's a property that's zoned for 40 stories within 1 mile of that commercially zoned land, then you can build to that highest height. So we were mapping where those properties were, and that's what that map is. But that means that when we're looking at neighborhood centers in our plans, we need to be kind of looking at it from both lenses. One, what is feasible and economical to do as a project that would not require a huge amount of investment in terms of financing and parking and making faster, easier projects to build, but also keeping in the back of our minds that it also means that it could be much larger. So I think the important part is to make sure that what's regulated at the ground level is very pedestrian friendly, and because while the state preempts things like height and density, the developers still have to use local regulations. So making sure that those regulations encourage the best possible frontages, the best possible public spaces, investing in the streetscapes and planting trees. So that's the other thing that we've been looking at. Yeah.
All right, good evening, everyone. I have to stand on my tippy toes a little bit here. So we had an opportunity to look at the city center as well as being an opportunity for that business incubator that Natalie mentioned earlier. And so this consisted of looking at underutilized sites and starting to think about how you could build these up. And so here was the area of focus, 19th Avenue at 163rd. And so thinking about what you could start with first. And so similarly to what Kenneth was mentioning, starting with the streets, creating streets that are walkable. And so the 19th Avenue is identified as being an urban greenway. And so thinking about how you can actually create that. So starting with having a large area for furnishings and green landscaping, having on-street parking, right-sizing the lanes so that you can create that pedestrian experience. Also having street lighting, so for safety concerns, and having shade trees to make that walk a little bit more pleasant. And so it's about creating streets that are for all modes, not just cars. Then when you think about creating the business incubator, you can start by looking at temporary uses and temporary structures. And so creating simple structures that are easy to assemble and disassemble, having public space and temporary and occasional events that happen in that space so that you can start to get to activate that area. We also had the opportunity to look at what if the City Hall were to be relocated, where could that be? And so thinking about that urban greenway on 19th Avenue, having that City Hall being sort of a terminating vista so that, like Natalie was also mentioning, that you know you're in North Miami Beach. And so that is a way to start to activate that area, that city center. And then as you continue to go on, you are able to redevelop parcels, activate community space even further, and start to think about redeveloping out parcels. And this is a way to just continue to activate the area and adhere to the pedestrian experience, as well as creating activated storefronts so that you have a place to have that furniture. We heard a lot about outdoor dining, having places to go, and so this is a way to start to think about building that out. And then we looked at sort of the long-term development. And so you can start with something small, right? Starting with the streets, and then you can work your way up to those temporary uses where you can have these activities that may be temporary, but eventually lead to something a little bit more strategic and grand. And so taking spaces that currently look like this, that don't have anything, and starting to think about how to create those spaces and activate them a little bit more. And so having the public space, public amenities, and activated storefronts. And so when we're looking at, as we continue to develop the comp plan, we'll be looking at the different areas of opportunity where things like this could be best implemented.
I recognize my slides. Good evening, everybody. I'm Joseph Cole with Dover Cole and Partners. So I kind of took on, I guess what I was surprised to hear is that the development community is not as eager to come into North Miami Beach as it is in other places, and so I was trying to think, well, why is that? And so I hear, well, it's, the comment I hear is, well, it's North Miami Beach, and not really knowing what that means. I was thinking about 163rd and 167th Street, and because it does have its own kind of unique character, and and so I was like kind of thinking about like, well, why does it look the way that it does? And it's an older corridor, and so parts of it there are buildings that were built before there were even parking regulations, and I would suspect, I would have been a little boy at the time, that there were fewer lanes in the road, and there was probably more parking on the street than we have now. And so those older buildings are basically being penalized by the state standards of trying to get people off Sunny Isles and onto the interstate in the event of a hurricane. And so the city's been compromised and thinking, okay, that's the main living, if you don't live here, that corridor is the living room of the community, and people judge the community by what they see there. So, you know, what I've learned is that there's always a physical reason why something is the way it is. It's always tied to that. And so we have this geeky term we use in urban design called the building to street relationship. And so I started looking at like, okay, that's got to be it. There's something wrong there. And so when you kind of, you know, we as humans like enclosed spaces, and whether it's subconscious or not, our brains are reading the environment that we live in and walk in. And so, and when you're in a street, it's the distance that the building is from the direction you're walking. And so what we've noticed is, like, you know, the reason people like to go to really cool places like older cities in Europe or older cities in the United States, because they can take a picture and you can see the buildings on both sides of the street in the same picture. And there's a certain character about the elements that are in that street. And, you know, Disney recreated it with their own main street because they picked up on the same stuff. And so theme parks and the shopping malls, the reason the shopping malls are narrow with that central corridor is that they also figured out that humans like things at a certain scale. And so they emulate that. And so when I look at here, when you kind of measure the distance from a building face to building face, along this corridor, we've got this kind of, you know, ins and outs, and it's rarely consistent anywhere along the corridor. And so, and then you couple that with what we know about great streets. And so I was encouraged to see that the CRA had just completed the study. They had Bermeo Ajamil create a street for Hanford Boulevard. And so it actually kind of points out some of the key things that make a great storefront. And so I'm just using their rendering because I'm not as gifted as these guys to do the renderings. But there's a few key things that we see in every great we keep talking about walkable streets. And that is that the buildings are closer to the footpath that people walk on. There's a transparency of the windows so that people can see inside and outside. And so that does a lot of things. It encourages you to walk down the street because you can be entertained by whatever or whoever you see through the windows. And also, they're adding surveillance to the street, so they're making it safer because they're inside. So if something wacky's going on outside, they can call the police, or they can come out and yell, or they can help the child who might have tripped, or the parent, etc. So that's a cool thing. We've also known that physically, the way that a great street is organized, that there's always a clear path to walk on. And it's got to be wide enough that you can actually walk two people side by side, and you can pass people and to get through. And then there's kind of this zone between the footpath and where the street goes. So, and usually in that strip you'll find that's where you put the street trees, that's where you might put a bench, that's where you put the trash can, the lamp posts. It's got a very functional use there, but it's also creating something of separation between you and the moving cars, because you don't want to walk on a 5-foot sidewalk next to 6 lanes of traffic, which we have to do here, right? And then you've got a layer of parking. And so again, having parking on the street, it also makes it safe because now you've put, I don't know how many tons of steel between you on the sidewalk and a moving car. So it's a safety barrier. It also has people that come in and out of the cars. So generally it slows down the cars. It helps us reduce traffic. And it brings more people onto the sidewalk. And when do you feel safe as a human being is when you're in a place that has more people, right? So, and then we don't see, like, you know, sometimes, I know the building that's right near West Dixie Highway, the newer one that was built, and there's a store that I zoomed in on it to see, sure enough, it says, please use the entrance on the other side. And it's because if there were more people on the sidewalk and if there was parking there, then, you know, that door would have been more viable. So these are the kinds of things there's other things that, so that's the safety issue that I mentioned. There's the protection from the moving cars, making sure that you're comfortable when you're walking. So again, do you feel safe? But are you also shaded and sheltered from the sun and the rain? And then, is it connected? So if we've got a lot of curb cuts crossing the sidewalk, then again, you're having to perhaps watch out to interact with another moving vehicle, which is never good. And so the on-street parking, like I've just mentioned. And then we've been talking a lot about biking as well. So there are certain streets where we may want to put bike lanes, and not bike lanes in the traffic with the moving cars on 4 feet, but actually a separated bike path that would be perhaps on the curb above the moving cars. So there's places that work. So just another diagram of how when you kind of measure the distance between buildings, it's very different. So I actually went through and kind of figured out, okay, why is this? And so we've got a bunch of situations. So it's kind of like, in most cities, their main drag is they kind of decide in advance what the character of the streets are going to be, and the buildings are generally relatively within the same distance from the curbs, and so I think the reason the street is so chaotic is that it's almost like anything goes, and I guess and that is a nature of just the length of time. And also being impacted by road widening. So we've got conditions where the parking lot is in the front, and in a lot of cases, is not on the corner. Sometimes they come in from the side, but then that creates a curb cut. It sets the building further back. So the sidewalk, once again, is detached. The sidewalks don't always line up because the buildings don't line up. And then some of the older buildings. This is another example of that. That's a little bit more unique, where the space is a little bit narrow, but they're parking. And then now you're getting the condition where there's a row of parking, but there's actually a landscape buffer between the sidewalk and the building. So it's further detaching the buildings from the sidewalk. And then the older buildings that I guess some gave up trying to put parking in front, and then they planted some trees and shrubs to try to make it look more attractive, but again, not connected. And then we've even got places where you have to back out of the parking space into a moving lane of traffic that is designed. I don't know what the design speed for 163rd is, but it's not 25 and it's not 35 and it's probably not 45 miles. And then the condition also where they'll take the long side of the building and put the parking on the side. So again, another condition. And then we've got gas stations, which just blows out the curb altogether, so it's not very walkable unless you're going to get an ice cream sandwich inside. And then in some places, it's just a big parking lot. So when you kind of lay that all out, it completely explains why we've got this thing. Now, the solution, I'm not sure yet, but I think just as we've been saying with the other projects, the city we can't wait for somebody to come in and do a whole new development project to make the sidewalks and the character of the street change. And it's such a long corridor between the interstate and Biscayne Boulevard that I don't think any city could take that on as a investment. So we've got to figure out how it could be incrementally implemented, and do it in such a way that we're not putting the local businesses out of business to do it, but actually because of even the buildings that don't have the parking in the front or do have in the front, there's a little bit of area in there. So it might be if we're willing to allow a wider sidewalk on private property or a bike lane on private property to basically just expand it, then we could. What we want to do is get the sidewalk off of the curb, and that would be the first thing that we should be trying to do to improve on it. So as throughout this project, what I'm going to be looking at is where along the corridor are these segments where we could actually try to propose a positive change to make the corridor a bit more walkable or bikeable. It doesn't, we don't have to try to do everything on the corridor all at once. But if we can find so in some segments, it might be better just to put a bike lane, put a separated bike lane and make a connection. And then there's other parts where there's more activity already taking place that you could build upon the walkability part. And then just like what the chamber did with their concept of a kit of parts for Hanford Boulevard, we can also be thinking about what would those kit of parts be for the corridor. And so I really think if we can drastically change the appearance of the corridor, then the outside world isn't going to say anymore, oh, it's North Miami. They're going to say, it's North Miami Beach. So, is there something else? Yeah.
Now that you're changing, for that same 167, 163rd Boulevard, that is a continuation of the 826
Yes,
highway.
yeah, State Road.
It's really transported from that highway to Sunnyals Beach and those places. We did a survey maybe like 15, 20 years ago. 180,000 traffic pass through there every day. And for us to try to struggle to put a bike lane there, I've seen dead bodies personally with these two eyes lying down on the road with a blanket over
Yeah,
them.
you don't want to put them in the roadway.
Right,
Yeah.
but what I'm saying, people just trying to cross in front of the old Kmart, people just trying to cross that thing and they get it done.
Yeah.
I'm not passing 24/7, it's just what I saw,
Yeah.
a few bodies. So you trying to put a bike lane there, it's gonna be a safety issue. I would not encourage anybody, even if I was not living in this city, I would not encourage any city to put a bike lane with 180,000 traffic going back and forth every day.
Well, there's certainly areas where maybe, that's what I was saying, is there's might be segments where you don't want to do that. But there might be other
Yeah,
segments
that
that you
is
can.
one segment
Yeah.
you do not want to do that.
Is there more? I can't see what.
So this is the playground section. This is-
We're going to ask questions. Oh. We're going to show you the missing slide and then ask you guys some questions.
Sorry, 1 second, guys. So,
So this was the other image that was from that neighborhood next to Yulita. This is Northeast 4th Place, where the post office is. And this is one street that it has the makings of a great before and after. So this is just looking at redoing that street. And then as a second step, potentially replacing some of those buildings.
So the street became narrower?
A little bit, yeah. It's still 2 lanes.
Yeah, you utilize the empty space.
Right.
Okay, I see. All right.
and we wanted to ask, are we on the right track? Is this the kind of intervention you're looking for within your different community spaces? Is this the proper neighborhood center that you are looking for?
I have concerns with the ADUs. Where you can put up a little building in your yard. And
Sorry,
that's
there's a
the-
lot of feedback. I'm wondering where that came from. Anyways, if it's not bothering you guys, we'll continue.
Okay, so what I'm saying with ADUs, the accessory dwelling units, where you put a little building in the existing compound of your home. And, you know, it's for granny or grandpa or whomever.
Yes.
But normally what we find is that after a while, they start pleading, man, I want to sell that place at the back there. And you fence it off, and next thing you know, the lot now becomes sublotted, and then you have a little narrow place for the new owner to come and decide. I've seen that where they pretty much destroy cities. Like long ago, they had nice big open spaces, and all of those open spaces now became house lots. And then you have one house behind the other, with a narrow piece of thing. So that is one thing you have to look at.
Yeah, they would have to be designed
Helping
appropriately.
Granny, and she lives for maybe a year or two. And what are we going to do with that now? No, there's no granny anymore. You know, let's sell it. Let's talk with our elected officials and see if they can allow us to sell these little ADUs. Granny doesn't live forever.
Yes, and there is the option of having it as multifamily. So if you were to have your younger children then reside within those properties when they grow up and want to start their own families, that's another option. But it could alternatively be a mode for you to have your properties and be able to rent out those spaces and have a secondary income coming through those rentals. What would be important is to make sure the design guidelines for those ADUs are in place, where you make sure there's a door facing the alley and windows on that street, so it doesn't become just walls along that entire alley system, but an actual activated space where people will feel safe with proper lighting within there. And if there's enough space for it, it does become a nice cozy area for a secondary, higher density, lower scale neighborhood sector within there. And it's only where it is appropriate and where it is desirable and able to happen because of the property owners and what they are willing to do for that ADU space.
Sounds like a very good idea. But when you talk about Miami alleyway, homes with a window right next to the alleyway, you're talking about crime. They break into the... I've had a family with their home braced right to the wall in the alleyway. They had to seal it up completely because people were breaking in and they were in Miami.
Yeah, it would also come in part with more safety measures and making the city as a whole a safer place to be. The ideas of having the windows is to have the eyes on the street mentality, where you could look out the window and see if anything's happening. And the more eyes you have towards the street, the more you're able to quickly react, which is the difference between having just a solid wall back there and you're never able to see if there's any crime happening. And yes, you have a question?
No,
You're agreeing?
when you were done.
Okay. Well, if you wanted to give a comment now.
Yeah, you had said, is this the right direction? Is this where you want to go? I should explain. I'm an employee in the city, but I've also been a resident since 2013. I own a house in Washington Park. I grew up in Boston, outside of Boston, and where I grew up, what was nice is you could literally walk around the corner. You had all turn-of-the-century brick buildings right there on the sidewalk. You could go have coffee, you could have something to eat. The train station that goes into Boston was right there, not even a quarter of a mile from my mom's house. And so I would say this is the right direction because, you know, as I run around town, what I see that makes me sad, if you will, is everything seems so dusty and sun-scorched, and it's always hot. And you don't dare walk anywhere because the traffic is so daunting. You know, you're always gonna drive. And I would love to live in a different environment where I felt like I could get out and walk, be under some kind of promenade where I'm not gonna get rained on, or I'm not gonna get sun-scorched myself. You know, and I could go get a cup of coffee or get some, just do a little bit of shopping for groceries or what have you. I would love that.
Yeah.
You know, so to me, this is the right direction.
Perfect, thank you. And that would alleviate some of the traffic concerns as well. The more you're able to walk to these different places, the less people there'll be on the street driving from one place to the other when it's just within a 5-minute walk from you. Yes.
To answer your question, I also feel like it is moving in the right direction. I've been an owner for 22 years in Highland Village, so I was curious because I saw a slide mentioning it, but I don't know if I quite caught what there was an idea for the future of it. I wasn't sure about that in the presentation.
It's part of the conversation of the flooding issues. Since the flooding is the main concern, it's the first step that is necessary. And as Ed had mentioned, there are different alternatives for ways to deal with that, and it's a mix of a little bit of everything. And just where's the proper first step? The first step currently is to create these downflow pipes, if Ed, if you wanted to speak more about it. But that's the first step, and then it's an assessment. And using that time for the assessment to really hone into exactly what steps you want now is a good time to mention those steps, as well as when that assessment is happening in the next following little while.
Yeah, part of, the difficult conversation with Highland Village is that there's been so many promises made along the way, like, oh, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do it, and there's no action. That right now folks are thinking like, well, are we actually gonna do something? But we need to get over that hump to think about how we can think about things comprehensively. And that conversation is partially occurring and not. The conversation is really focused on the engineering, just the engineering. Are we going to get the backflow preventers, and how are we going to get the pumps? But what we understand from a comprehensive standpoint and from what the neighborhood really needs is to think about these other types of interventions and design items that we talked about earlier in the evening. But right now where we are is these are ideas and concepts. We got option A, B, and C. We got to combine them. But our community hasn't come together past getting over the hump of thinking just about the engineering. And this is where this conversation needs to go further within the comprehensive plan so that we can actually get something that will work for Highland Village. So it's not that we're not thinking about it. We wish we could be at the point where we can say, hey, this is the exact plan. But we need that exact plan to be something that the community also is willing to do as well. And so there's a next step in the conversation right now.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I didn't really get addressed in the meeting on Wednesday, but, that area, like the front and the more north part of Highland Village is right at the entrance of what would be North Miami Beach. And I remember, because I live so close to North Miami, I'm surrounded by North Miami, I would occasionally watch meetings that were talking about buildings entering into North Miami, and they talk about how the first building is what makes the impression. So right at the end of my block is where they're building like the next door residence, which is this 16, 17-story building. But then right next to it is this like dilapidated, abandoned restaurant that's been there for I think at least 8 years, like that. So, and then the next block over, we have the Solomia entrance, and that is actually created a lovely walking space. So now I'm like, great, I have a walking path. I'm just not in North Miami Beach anymore. But anyway, my point is that all the people who are working there are so close by that they are going to look for a place to live that is within walking distance of that medical center. And it very much is, because it only takes me like 7 minutes to walk into that medical center from where I am. So my point is that it'd be interesting to see about how to develop at least the front-facing part as much as we can. There's not a lot to do. I don't know how to acquire that property or what the plans are for there. But to have this nice fancy building coming up and then right next to it be this abandoned restaurant, it just feels like there's a lost opportunity, and that, there needs to be more discussion about that in the future, near future.
Yeah. So I'm going to bring, if you indulge me for a second, a minute, I'm going to tell you one of the best things I heard as a student. When I was a student ages ago, we have something called a comprehensive exam. If you fail it, you can't take it for a year, but you need to pass it to get your master's, where I went to school. And my area of concentration was economic development. And one of the biggest lessons from the panel that they told every student who passed the exam was, you guys passed because you understood that planning is about building blocks, and that building block starts from building upon your existing assets. So what you just gave me was an example, a good example of an existing asset. And so let's connect that to the ideas that Natalie was talking about and Joe was talking about. It's about those assets and what we need to change, but it's also about the assets exactly in the positive light that you're talking about. It's like, how can you do more of the same? Because there's that disconnect, right? You're talking about that disconnect, like, hey, this looks good, and the next block over, not as good. So how do we get it to be the same? We get to the same by thinking about the idea that we talked about here this evening, about codifying it into a long-range plan and taking that building block and use that, what is good, as a leverage. Because that leveraging is there because we know that people like that, right? So can we replicate it? Can we replicate it in a way where you're going to latch onto it? Can we replicate it in a way where someone's going to invest? And if they're not going to invest, what programs do we need to do? Is it a facade improvement program? Is it a creation of a space that is an incubator so that someone can invest in their own business and occupy that space? And then create that aspect of maintaining that space. I'm glad you brought that up because it just speaks to the essence of what we're trying to do in a long-range plan.
The only issue I have is, I don't necessarily love that the building is so high because everything else in the neighborhood is so low, except for the one building that's next to it, which happens to be the same developer.
Right.
It's 8 stories. So what happens is that there's just a lot of disjointedness. It's like these humongous buildings coming up, and then everything else is so low. And it's like, how long is it going to take for everything to kind of even out? It seems as if it's very haphazardly improved, even though it's said to be very thought out.
Right. So I think that speaks to what Kenneth was trying to get up with understanding of the background about when we're talking about these higher areas of density, because we have to think about community balance and how we think about in the future. Will it even out? Well, it depends on what rules that you put in place, right? Sometimes when you put in the wrong rules, it won't balance out. I've been to plenty of cities, I worked with a lot of comprehensive plans, and it doesn't always pan out that way. So it's great that we're having the conversation now because it is, a vital concern for the community, and it's definitely, something that we'll take into account in the comprehensive plan process.
On that note, it's also about the economic feasibility of the structure. It's not always feasible to have such a tall building, even though it might be what the developer desires, and it's not what the community desires. There's a middle ground that feeds both interests. And it's having a smaller structure that doesn't need as much construction costs, and still has the appropriate space, both to create a community center for the residents, as well as having the appropriate financial backing from that the developers need, and it's all about that middle ground.
The last little thing I wanted to mention was I noticed in the presentation there's a lot of street parking, but when some of these buildings were being approved, we brought up the fact that we have a lack of street parking specifically in County Village, but throughout the city you could see that there's a lot of people park on swales, but then the pushback was that, well, the code was written so that you can't have street parking. So is the recommendation to have more street parking? That's what I'm gathering from the photos.
Yes, so the comprehensive plan is the first step in being able to rewrite the code based off of the goals that we hear. So if the goal is to have on-street parking and it's written into the comprehensive plan, it could then be implemented as a zoning change. The issue in part here is because there's an FDOT street going through the middle. It becomes a federally regulated street. It's harder to be able to put on-street parking on there without having to do a partnership with FDOT. which is a possibility. It takes a lot of additional years to be able to implement that, but it is one of the steps that could be taken. On local streets, there is the opportunity to create on-street parking if it were written into the comprehensive plan and then passed into a code.
What I noticed.
Wait,
sorry,
one question.
sorry,
We have a hand up for a while. Yes. What's your question?
I grew up in Miami,
Yeah.
and I've seen developments like this happen. And what happens is that the old businesses that were there, they're pushed out. So what's going to be done to save the old businesses that have been here in Miami Beach for years? But the development was going to be done so that because of the development, their rent doesn't raise this or anything like that. What's going to be done to save them and keep their business in Miami Beach?
So part of our process isn't to create any specific development. We're not developers, just to make that clear. But we are proposing for the comprehensive plan to implement opportunities to create business hubs and business centers and incubator spaces in a lot of these lots that are currently empty. There is the opportunity to be able to have temporary uses at lower scales that could be where these business incubation ideas happen, where you could start the mom and pop shops that once these businesses come in, they are more inclined to then have you as a resident, and you could make a deal to have that space since you are already in that area and known to be in that area. It's one of the first steps to be able to stay within that area and create these localized businesses, which are always great for both the local economy and what we all desire when we go somewhere. We're looking for local businesses to actually understand and be able to have local cuisine, for example. Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
I don't know that there's anything in place right now that can address that issue in the current rules of the city. And a lot of what we're showing are ways that are, I guess, we're focusing on the physical design of showing how the city could do something maybe better than what the current rules are pushing. And what you're suggesting is a great idea. And I think it would be fruitful for us to investigate how that could be put into place, whether it's part of this comp plan or could be addressed sooner.
From what I understand, it is going on in Florida. A lot of those trailer parks, they're being taken over by developers. Like one guy in Highland Village, as we mentioned, he has over 100 units. And soon they're going to be selling out. They're going to be giving the people notices. I'm not saying for that particular park, but for other parks that happened in Florida, they give them notices, they went to court, all sorts of things, and finally, they moved out and higher buildings went up. I do not know if the same people came back in or different people, but I saw that with my own eyes in other places in Miami. They had these little nice little trailer stuff, but then one morning you just see they start putting up a fence around, and the people moved out, and nice buildings put up there, like 8-story or 10-story. So there's going to be a transition. We call it gentrification, but there's going to be a transition from getting from one place to the next. There's going to get some gentrification going on there, but that is the vision now for Florida because of this, year-round sunlight that we get, and a lot of people want to move to this state, and where are you going to, go? So Florida is going to be getting more people, and there is going to be some, as I mentioned, gentrification and so forth.
Yes, and that's always a concern in all areas, especially in Highland Village. There are also specific challenges to the site that is not of the citizens who love their community and would not want or allow easily for that to happen. And we want to make sure that they are able to stay within their community. I'm not sure there are any policies in place currently that we have that, or that we could put in place that would not allow it.
Just the state laws.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, gentrification is not an easy concept to unpack because it comes in many different forms, and it's about how you balance growth in a community with the change from older buildings to new buildings with opportunity. Are you creating a place that has opportunity for everyone, and not just from a housing standpoint, but a sense where they can grow economically? Because if you're not creating a place where someone can take advantage of education, can take advantage of time to invest in a business, can invest in their own business, can invest in their economic growth, then absolutely gentrification will happen. If you have a community where you're not creating a balance of housing so that there are different price points, that includes thinking about our older buildings and rehabilitating them and having a diversity of housing stock, the missing middle that you saw on the slide earlier, then yes, absolutely gentrification can occur. So how do we deal with it from a long-range plan standpoint? We deal with it by looking at ways that we need to create policy about education in a livable city. We think about ways that we can create affordable housing by providing different footprints, just like about affordable, the accessory dwelling unit, which has a different price point. We don't allow that in the city right now. We don't have incubators in the city right now. We do not have a facade program that is utilized by a lot of folks, even though we have a facade program in the city that is utilized by some of the older residential buildings and has done a great job in building some of the buildings that we have in our community. So what can we do different is the question we think about as we move forward. That's not a question that is inherently answered tonight, although we have given part of that framework in the presentation. Whether it's about ADU, whether it's about thinking about how we create this different space along the corridor so that we have the shell of the space. The next step in the comprehensive plan is thinking about the program. What programs do you need to do to create that opportunity for someone that they can take advantage of so that they can grow their income, that they can control their household costs, that they don't have to spend all that time driving because the job is closer, and they can invest that time in either taking their kids to our local library, a wonderful library, by the way, which has one of the librarians of the year, where they can think about how they can invest that time. They're not traveling, but they're closer to work, so that they can invest that time into a business that they can grow their income with. Like I said, gentrification is multifaceted. It's not just about preventing change. It's about creating opportunities for the people who live here to grow with that change a little bit differently. If you want a city that can combat gentrification, we need to think about that differently. We have a framework. It is not the only piece. And so, as over the course of next year, if we think about how we're going to write a comprehensive plan, we're going to think about those policies. We're going to think about those programs. And we're going to meld the physical form with the social planning aspect that we need to continue to make the city grow and improve and be better.
Yes.
I guess he sort of answered my concern about, I think there's a difference between revitalization versus gentrification. And I hope that you guys push for this area to become more revitalized, because it needs it. I'm sorry, it does.
Yes, and this is just the beginning for us. This is a gathering of all the information from the community members that we could then understand and make into these different graphics that we then are now showing you to make sure we're on the right track. Is there any other graphic that you think is not on the right track from what we've shown? Sorry.
Let's do that. I'm going to grab my stuff.
Yes.
Yoink.
Of course. Sorry. Of the different graphics you've seen today, is there any that you believe is not on the right track or is on the right track? For example, with this graphic, of the business incubator spaces and creating different open spaces throughout. Would you say that that's on the right track, or if we should be thinking about it a little bit differently?
That's one of my favorite images.
Which street would it represent?
19th Avenue.
This is 19th
63rd.
19th Avenue and 163rd.
Yeah, currently it's supposed to have like an 18-story building going up there. It was supposed to be a hotel. It went into bankruptcy.
Yeah.
Now they have a cloth, a wrap around it, a lot of junk in it. I think the building was like 20 million or something. I do not know if the city is going to want to, buy that piece of land to put like a three-story high building there. Normally, what we're finding is that, an acre of land here in the city now is going for like 20 million. And the investor now, he wants to get back his money and make a little profit. So that is why things are going really high, 32-story, 40-story high, just to get back their money because the lots are being sold at a pretty penny. So in terms of the city buying that lot, I think in your presentation you said the city buying the lot and, or acquiring the lot and putting up that. I can't say anything right now because of the city's money flow, but it looks nice and neat how it is there from what we're seeing presently. Looks like a nice presentation, but practicality, reality, and physicality of actually putting buildings up there now. I think they have they acquire a permit and then they put the land up for sale quietly. Then another guy comes, he buys it for a higher price and puts a wrap around it and nothing is done. We've been approving these lots for the last 10 years. We've approved dozens of lots. Nobody builds anything, or hardly anybody builds anything. They just leave it there and hoping that they're going to get a quick sale. But when they come before the mayor and council or the mayor and commissioners now, they painted a nice rosy picture, but they in the back of their mind knew that they were not going to do anything. But they just get the permit and then they move on. And that's where.
So this idea was the representation of the business incubator space and creating smaller structures, temporary uses, while they wait for the future development when a miracle happens and you're able to get the price point for the large high rises and the construction costs go down within the city, which is a potential future since it is allowed within this area. But in the how many years will that take? And in the meantime, we could be using this space to grow the economic basis of the city through small local businesses that could become such a fruitful endeavor that it becomes a larger business incubator hub and moves in that direction. There's always the possibility, and it takes one first idea, one spark of a concept to inspire this sort of plan for the future.
Revitalize these business fronts. That is actually what the Community Redevelopment Agency, that started in early 2000, and after 20 years, North Miami Beach is not looking spruce and sprucey as how it's supposed to be. That was what the CRA is about.
Yeah, and we agree. This is the time to implement the policies that make it feasible to do these.
You hear one developer comes by and he gets a good grab of the CRA money, and the mom and pop store who's been paying year after year after year, they got nothing. Not even a coat of paint, and they say, oh, 50-50. The city put up 50, you put up 50. It's the people's money. Give them their money and let them spruce whatever they have. As you say, you put a temporary building there, well, let them, paint up and spruce up. We don't have to wait for a developer who can actually afford to do without the CRA money. Come and collect the little mom and pop monies that's supposed to be going to them and collects it, and, you know, it's like, you give it somebody who already have, don't
Exactly.
need it, and you starving the others who really need it, the CRA then is not working.
Thank you. Yes, that is exactly what we're trying to make feasible and possible through this. Yes?
I was wondering if there was any talk of people wanting, like, I know that one of the words was destination, right?
Yes.
So I know that's important to me. I feel like if I want to go do something, I have to go to another city to do it. Was there any talk of wanting of a larger space, like a city, like the city of Doral has, or like Miami Gardens is about to get, where it's like a city space where they have like lots of restaurants where you have room to walk after dinner? Because I think that's one of the things that I don't really find is like there's nowhere, like sometimes I'll go out to dinner and I don't have anywhere to go walk and just be around, except for like the snake.
Right.
You did hear about that.
Yeah.
But there's, you know, I would want to just be able to park, eat, and be able to walk around a neighborhood or something. And it's just not really
Right.
conducive in this city.
Right.
So I wasn't sure. if
Yeah.
you could speak about
So
that.
there are different ways that, you know, between what you saw tonight and other efforts the city's engaging in. Outside of this plan, the city's also creating a plan for what we call transit-oriented development around a planned train station that the county has been moving forward, something that you may have heard of in the past as the SMART plan. It's going to go with a different name, but it involves a commuter rail where they have a proposed train station at the intersection of 151st and US 1. So when that happens, and it is highly ranked on the list for federal project for new start funding, so it's really up there, like on federal grant in federal grant world. That creates an opportunity for us to think about, hey, there's a new connectivity to the city, to other places, all the way down to downtown Miami and up to Aventura. And when you have those connections, there's, you know, and it's a large area to think about, there's an opportunity there to think about that area a bit differently. Within the existing ideas of what our folks have come up with tonight, if we were to think about the concept of City Hall, if we were to relocate City Hall, now where we are right now in City Hall is a large space as well. So there's some imagining that might need to be done on how to create that sort of gathering space or that walkable space or that destination that you're talking about. And, you know, there's a larger destination, and we also talked about the smaller destinations as well this evening. Okay, you wanna?
And on that note, we're going to, you could then come up or see the boards and speak to us directly if there are any other additional points that you would like to make. But the goal is to create all these different destination space, to create the opportunity for these different destination spaces that could be a large center or small community oriented spaces, and interconnecting all of them. Perfect. So thank you so much for being here tonight. Oh, yes.
Yes, let me add something. With the revitalization of the storefronts, in general, what I've seen, businesses will not be able to easily find 50% to contribute to the project. For instance, to revitalize a facade of the building may cost, say, 45,000 estimate, right? So if it's 50% of the funding coming from the CRE and then 50% the business owner has to provide, that's where it would not work, because for a business to come up, generally someone who owns a small restaurant to come up with 45,000 would be quite a challenge. So the solution normally what cities I've seen across the United States were doing, they were providing some kind of incentives, some financing programs with either low interest rate, a partnership with say banks or credit unions, or some kind of no interest rate for a period of time funding, and that would create a substantial movement in revitalizations of cities.
Yes.
So that's what's missing part to that there is no backup help for business owners to and to do something without going deep into depth.
Yes.
That-
And
The biggest part
Thank
here that
you.
we're missing, the missing link, the CRA money is not the city's money. It's these little mom and pop that has been just contributing to that enterprise for the last 20 to 25 years or 23 years. They have been putting the property taxes there. Now the city put a hindrance, a high wall for them to scale over 50-50. It should have been like 90-10, where the store owners, they provide 10% and the city give them back the 90% or something like that. But it's ridiculous, and that is why you see our storefronts are like this. They can't. You're about to retire, and you have a $50,000 in the bank. You're not going to take it to go and paint your store and do this and that and that because the business is not flowing as it should, right? And so the city is going to say, I can give you this $50,000, okay, but you're going to have to put up another $50,000. And that basically is like the hindrance that is happening. These people do not have that money. Or even if they have it, they're holding on because it's not looking rosy for the last 10 years, 15, 20 years since the Gulf Wars and so started. It's not looking too rosy unless you're one of those big investors. But we're talking about these little mom and pop. The CRA is to prevent blight. The blighted community, but it's not working. I keep saying, I don't have any personal grievance against a CRA director or what have you, but the policy that the city has implemented, it's not working so far for this city. You go to North Miami, they're nice 125th Avenue, you can see, oh man, wow, this is what they did with their CRA money. This thing is working here, but it's not working in our city. And the big thing right now is if we should close off the CRA in the county. That is the big thing.
Yeah.
And then we have I think 2028 to decide, either 27 or 28 to decide that.
And, we're going to take that into account because it sounds like your idea here, Ms. Kazan, with your citing North Miami, I know that pretty well because Corradino and myself included was involved in the downtown corridor plan. We thought about things like the space at Iron Manor, about the streetscape, and also, how we could activate the space around the NOMA, the Museum of Art. Taking account of things like, hey, going across the street to the little cafe where I used to frequent, where I heard these emerging artists. So what you're looking for then is that, to think about how the CRA can think about those small intervention projects. But those small intervention projects become, are part of those larger thoughts, that even Joe had talked about tonight, about how you think about the corridor, right? About how you activate a corridor. And so I think it's a point well taken, but it's not rooted in us discussing necessarily about how, at the first go, eventually we do talk about it, but not the first go is not about how we talk about how the CRA spends its money. But rather, what are the ideas that we can use to infill those spaces like we talked about here? What are those ideas that will draw people? What are the events that we should be investing in? Then, when we have those ideas, we have a vision. And vision is what you put your money behind. I think what you're looking for, Mr. Kazan, is to look at our vision intently and intensely, a little bit differently, so that we can do a little bit of thought process like North Miami did when, on the project I had worked with them as well. Think about those interventions like Iron Man in the film space. Think about the fountain. Think about that walkability. Think about how we can support and leverage those existing assets. They had a museum there. They leveraged that asset. We don't. So what assets are we leveraging? What different are we infilling? I think it's a point well taken. And with that, I would love to continue that conversation. If folks want to, talk with staff and consultants in the back, we'll be here in the back a little bit. And we appreciate everyone's time with these are really great thoughts and comments we got from you all tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you too. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for being here.
telling the more and trying to think about this a bit more because we're always stuck here. And I don't want it to be